And Brian, you should see now it just switched over to live. People will be joining with us here shortly. We'll get started in just a sec. Hello, everyone. I'm Scott Parish, Solution Architect at Blackbaud. Welcome to Use the School API to scrub data for incoming students and parents. We'll get started with Brian in just a short moment. Just wanted to bring to your attention, we're excited to share this awesome opportunity this year to win one of 3 innovation grants. Winners will work directly with our 2024 innovation grant sponsors, Microsoft, NP Automate, and Sentinel Consulting for free to help bring their ideas to life. You'll see this QR code here, or you can go to blackbaud.co/innovation grants to apply. Applying is easy. It's just a 2-minute or less video pitch with your project idea. Applications do not need to be a polished presentation. Don't be intimidated. Our past award winners have been surprised and delighted that their idea was accepted. So take a few minutes to share your idea with us. We look forward to seeing your exciting proposals. Deadlines for submissions for that is 5 p.m. today. Now I'm going to pass it to Brian Gray, who's the database administrator at St. Stephen's Episcopal School. Brian is a system administrator, database manager, programmer, and teacher at St. Stephen's Episcopal School in Austin, Texas. He's the primary administrator for online services for the school, including Blackbaud, Google, and several others. Brian, I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Scott. Give me just a second to share my screen. Maybe. There we go. So as Scott said, I am the database administrator, primary platform manager, and programmer for Blackbaud APIs and several other services that we use. In the next few minutes, I want to talk with you about my workflow for onboarding incoming students and their parents, how we get data from Finalsite, and then do the data cleanup that we need to do. St. Stephen's is obviously a private school in Austin. We have students in grades 6 through 12. We have about 700 students on campus. About 170 of those students are from around the world and live on campus during the school year. They all just went home on Friday and Saturday. We get about 150 new students each year, and we've got to do data cleanup on every one of those students and all of their parents. So I've got programs that help me do that consistently. The environment that I work with is my programs are all written in Visual Studio. I use VB.net, but any of the Visual Studio languages are available. I use Skylab.net from Protege Solutions. We'll talk more about that. It's a .NET library that wraps around the Blackbaud APIs, makes life for me lots easier. Our enrollment management tool is Finalsite Enrollment. Used to be called School Admin. We've been using it for about 10 years. The data comes from the admission office, cloud-to-cloud data transfer into Core. And the last tool that I use all the time are the Blackbaud community groups for the Education Management API, the Developers API, and the K-12 Platform Managers group. As much as we'd like to pretend otherwise, we know that no data is perfect. In fact, we know that some of the data that we get from Finalsite needs work for every record. And then we need to go look for other problems. We know, for example, that all the phone numbers are going to be in the wrong format. Wrong only because it's not the one we want to use. We know that digital greeting field is going to be empty. The preferred mailing box checkbox isn't going to be there. Students won't have a primary parent or lives with parent. And for parents who are new to the school, the salutations are going to be missing. So we have to fix all of that. But we also have to check for duplicate user records. We have to look for missing preferred names, country names that don't match up with our list, our format. We need to look for missing siblings and what I call evil twins. Sometimes we can wind up with a student linked with a relationship as his own sibling, which confuses the heck out of a lot of other programs. Sometimes the spousal relationships can be linked twice, and sometimes the gender and name prefixes are missing. Scott, if you'd go to full screen for me, please. This is the report that we get from Finalsite when we do a data transfer. Our admission office controls this transfer. They decide when students are ready to transfer from Finalsite into core. When they do, we get this report. You can see in this case, the couple of records up at the top, the country wasn't in the right format. We, of course, have South Korea in our database, but it wasn't formatted in exactly this way, so the data transfer flagged it as an error. Other problems occur but aren't considered errors during the Finalsite transfer. As you can see at the bottom section, there are no nicknames for these incoming students, but Finalsite doesn't consider that to be an error. We do, but Finalsite doesn't. I've got a 3-stage process that I use, and the programs help me out at each of those 3 steps. First, I do what's called a data standardization of individual records. These are looking at just fields within a single record. It automates the fixes to that data. It formats phone numbers. It adds missing preferred names. And for parents who don't already have one, it writes a BBID in. This program generates a bunch of CSV files that I then immediately import back into core. Once that process is done, I move on to what I call the account audit. And this is looking at relationships mostly. As in the data standardization, the first part, it's all the fixes are done by CSV imports. In this stage, everything's manual. This program is generating a list of problems, my work list of things to go fix. And then I will run it as often as I need to verify that I've got all of the fixes done and I didn't introduce any new problems in the course of fixing other problems. The last stage is to generate those salutations for the parents who don't have one. These are generated according to our rules for our formats of salutations. It goes off, it generates a CSV file that goes off to the registrar for review, and then I do the import back into core. I mentioned Skylab a minute ago. And this is very important to my work. All of my programs that access the API are doing it through Skylab. I want to take a minute just to say that I'm not an employee of Skylab, of Protege Solutions. I'm not getting paid. This is not paid advertising. I like their product. It's a very, very good tool for me. And everyone who programs in Visual Basic or Visual Studio should know about it. It has endpoints for all of the APIs, the school API, the RENXT, FENXT, all of them are covered. Every endpoint for every API is there. if you go to their site and download the package, you'll get sample code in C# and VB.NET. If you do nothing else with this package, you can download it, set it up, and use the sample programs to generate authorization keys for some other environment that you want to work in. The reason I like it so much is because it hides all of the terrible, ugly details from me. I don't have to worry about OAuth. I don't have to worry about refresh tokens or access tokens. It eliminates the headaches of just making the connection and keeping it working. It's worth every penny that I pay for it to have it available for me in my programs. Here's a sample code of connecting to Sky API via Skylab. This code initially started as the code in the sample program that I downloaded from Protege Solutions. I've obviously adapted it to fit my needs, but it's the original code from the example. We've got to fill in the subscription primary key and secondary key, the redirect URL, the client ID. I have to set up the basic auth credentials and the client secret. I also have to feed it a Skylab license key so that my programs will run at full speed. You can use Skylab without a license key, but it is in a rate limited mode when you do that. Once I've done that very little setup, those few lines of setup, I call the init method, which goes off and makes the connection, verifies everything, and I'm ready to get to work. In most of my programs, one of the first things that happens is that I'm going to call user extended get on some combination of user roles. Just like you would see in the try it or any other environment, I just feed it a list of role IDs and a marker for the next page of data, and it goes off and gets 1,000 records. When I get that 1,000 records back, I'm going to loop through every one of them. I do some exclusions here. I've got some temporarily ignorable user IDs and some permanently ignorable user IDs. I've got several fake users in my system. We'll see a couple of them in a minute, but I exclude those users from my process. And temporarily, I need to exclude some users if something really weird happened with their data and it's taking longer than I want to wait to get their data cleaned up. I need to move on and handle some other families. So I'll temporarily exclude some people while I'm working on others. Once I've done that, I've excluded the ones that I want to exclude. If the user has a username record, I'm going to add them to a hash table keyed on that username. And if the user is an incoming user, I'm going to put them in another hash table keyed on the user ID. And the bottom part of this is just looping through to get multiple pages of data. I get the first 1,000 and process them, get the next 1,000 and process them, keep going until there's none left. And that's how I read the users that I'm interested in. This is one of the methods that I use in the data standardization process. Again, we're looking at preferred names, preferred mailing address checkbox, digital greeting, phone number formatting, and parent BBIDs. The phone numbers are formatted one way for US numbers and another way for international numbers, but we want them to all be formatted in one of those two ways. The code on the right is the code that handles the missing preferred name, missing nickname. So up at the top, I create a header record for the CSV file and write that out. And then I loop through each of the users that I'm looking at. And if the preferred name field is empty, I'm going to create a CSV record for that user write in the ID number, the first name and the last name, and then I write the first name again as the preferred name. I write that record out to the CSV and set a flag that says I've written at least one record into this file. When I'm done with all of it, I close the CSV, and if the file has no data, that is, I didn't find any records that were missing a preferred name, I delete the file so that I don't try to import an empty file. The file names are first, of course, tell me which file is which, but the prefixes on these file names also help me remember where in the data import menu each of these files go. So CC tells me that it's a contact card, AD tells me it's the address and salutations import type. I upload the file, put in an import name, and send it off for processing. I do the same thing for each of these. CCGU is contact card general user, CCPH contact card phones, and then UM for user management to get those parent BBIDs in. Most days, if I've had enough coffee, I remember where the preferred mailing CSV file goes, but sometimes I need a little help remembering, and just adding those prefixes to the names saves me a little bit of thought once in a while. I don't use puts and patch calls in here. And there's a reason for that. The original reason was that when I started writing these programs, puts and patches for some of these fields just didn't exist. There was no option except for importing CSV files. So I wrote the programs to create the CSV files. My rationale now for sticking with CSVs, and honestly, this may be a rationalization instead of a rationale, but the upside is that using the CSVs just adds an extra check in the import process. If a CSV import fails, it tells me that something else is wrong that my programs didn't catch, and I need to go back and take a closer look. And in the cases where that's happened, it also results in me modifying my programs to catch those problems in the future. I don't have to, if I use the CSV imports, I don't have to think about how to link the addresses and the phone numbers. It just happens. And it also just acts as a buffer against future changes. The upsides, of course, come with a little bit of cost. The downsides are that I have to take an extra step to clean up the accented characters in the first name and last name fields in the imports, because Blackbaud hasn't figured out how to match accented characters yet, apparently. So I have to strip out the accented ones and put in non-accented approximations. And the biggest problem is that the data imports are queued. And they can take some time to run. Sometimes it's just a couple of minutes, but sometimes it can take an hour or more for those imports to run. But that time that I spend waiting on imports to run is well worth the advantages I get from the extra error checking in the import process. Once those imports are done, then it's off to the account audit. And again, this is looking at relationships between the incoming student and other records connected to the student. So these are purely manual updates. Whatever problems are found have to be fixed manually. And that's because there's just too many variations on what the right answer is going to be. It's going to vary depending on the individual student and the household situation. You know, one family, one parent, split households, all of those different things result in different outcomes as to how we fix it. So I don't try to make any guesses in the programs. I can look for hints in core records. I can look for hints in the final site records. I can talk to the admission office staff because they know these families better than I do. And if we need to, we occasionally just contact the parents and ask for clarification. In this record audit, again, we're looking at relationship information. We're going to look for everyone. We're going to check to make sure that the address record is there. If it's a US address record, we want to make sure the state abbreviation is valid. We're going to look for missing first names. That never happens with students, but occasionally a parent record will sneak through without a first name. Occasionally the preferred name gets set to the word none. Our rule is that everyone has a preferred name, even if it's the same as the first name. So if none is in there, it'll flag that for me as well. And last thing, all of the records get a check for is a home phone number. Fewer and fewer people, of course, have home phone numbers, but some of our third-party vendors expect to see one. So we'll just create a home record using the same phone number as one of the parents' cell numbers. For students, we'll take a look more closely at the student code in just a minute, but students, we're going to look to see, is the address record linked to a parent? Is there a primary parent or resides with a parent, a responsible signer parent, a couple others? Do they have a school ID that our bookstore uses? Do they have boarding or day flag set correctly? If they're boarders, we need a citizenship information in there. We look for possible siblings that aren't linked to this incoming student. I'll show you an example of that in a minute. And we look for those evil twins, a student who is his own sibling. For parents, we look for the name prefix, the gender and the name prefix have to be there, and they have to at least not obviously conflict. So if the gender is male and the prefix is Mrs., it's going to flag it and we're going to go investigate something. And we're going to check for more than one spouse relationship record. We're not judging, but sometimes we get the same two people linked twice as spouses, and that confuses some of our other code. So here's the code for the part that is checking a student record. So this call gets made on every record. So if it's not a student, we're immediately going to return. There's nothing to look for. Then we look to see what the relationship count is for this student. If there are no relationships, then none of the rest of this makes any sense. So we write out that message and stop looking. The next thing we do is call a check for linked addresses. That is the student's address record linked to one of his parents? Then we set up some flags that'll keep track of whether I've seen a parent record with resides with, the parent record with primary parent, parental access, list as parent, and responsible signer. Our rules is that every student must have each of those 5 boxes checked for at least one relationship. So I set up some code to look for it, and then I go get those relationship records by calling the relationship get on the user ID of the student. Once I've got those relationships, I'm just going to loop through each of the relationships on the student's record. And if it's a parent-ish relationship, that is parent, step-parent, or guardian, we're going to look to see which of the boxes this particular parent has checked. If this particular parent has the resides with box checked, then I check the box that says, yeah, this student has at least one resides with parent. Same for primary parent and parental access and list as parent and responsible signer. Again, we don't have to have all 5 boxes on one record, but we've got to have at least one parent with each of these boxes checked. After we check those relationship records, we look at the student ID, the school ID, I should say. And again, that's used by our bookstore in our business office, so we have to be sure that that is set from the beginning. We check for boarding and day. If the student is a boarding student, then I look to see if the relationship field is set. If not, we write out that message too. Next, I write out error messages if any of those 5 flags are not set yet. So if we didn't see anyone with the primary parent flag set, we write out that message. Same for the other 4. The last step is check for missing siblings. It's easier to explain this with an example that I've got on the next slide. But this is checking for, are there other students that are already enrolled at the school who are probably siblings of this incoming student? The audit report, the log file that gets written out, is my work list. And this is what a couple of those entries look like in the work list. So I have an example student here, an example. She's an incoming student from Italy, and we have no primary parent set, no resides with parent set. Somehow she made it through without a parental access parent set. So we've got to fix all of those. And then this possible missing sibling. So an example has a parent, Alicia example, and Alicia example has another child, Anthony example. Well, if Anthony and Anne both have the same parent, chances are Anthony and Anne are siblings, but there's no sibling record linking them together. So we need to go in and verify that they are in fact siblings and then link them. The example down at the bottom of the page is Alicia example, the parent's record, role as parent of incoming student, has no gender, has no prefix, and has multiple spouse relationships. Again, we're not judging multiple spouse relationships, we're just eliminating the duplicated ones. I run that program and do the work manually to correct the problems, and then I run the program again. I do that for 2 reasons. First, I might have just accidentally skipped over a line and forgot to click save on somebody's record after I fixed it, so I might not have actually fixed a problem. The other reason is I might also have created a problem while fixing another one. So I run the first part of the audit multiple times until I get a clean report, no problems. After I get a clean report on the relationships, we go off to generate salutations. The salutations are built according to the rules we have for formatting salutations. They get written to a CSV file that the registrar then reviews manually, and then I import them back into core. This is the code that generates the proposed salutations for a household with 2 parents. Our business rules say that if we have 2 parents and one of them is male and one of them is female, we're going to list the male first. So if they're out of order, the program swaps the IDs, and then I go off and get those user objects for both of the parent records. And then I build a CSV record that says I've got 2 parents. It's the home record that we're going to update. I write in the user ID, the gender, the prefix, clean up those names so that they're good for the import, and do the same for the second user. And then down at the bottom, I make 3 calls to create an informal salutation, a formal salutation, and a household salutation. And then I write that record out to the CSV. Here's the code that creates the formal salutation. This is Mr. Smith or Mr. and Mrs. Smith format. If we have only one parent, that is, if the second parent is empty, then it's pretty simple. We take the user's prefix and we take the user's last name, and that's the salutation. Otherwise, we go off and get the record for the second user, and then we look at the last names. If the last names of the 2 users are the same, we take the prefix of the first and the prefix of the second, and then add the last name, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. If the last names are different, we take the user one's prefix and last name and user two's prefix and last name. So Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones, Mr. Smith and Dr. Jones, Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones, whatever the combination is. The APIs make my onboarding work quicker, easier, and better. It automates some of the fixes by writing out those CSVs for the individual records. And then I just turn around and import those back in. That helps me to apply our business rules consistently, getting the phone numbers formatted the way I want them to be, making sure that everyone has certain fields filled in. Then the next step is flag other problems that I can't fix automatically, but I do need to know about and I do need to fix. Some of them are quick and easy. Others take a little bit of research. Sometimes I might forget to look for some unusual problem, but the program doesn't forget. It keeps me on task because it generates a list of things for me to do. The program doesn't get distracted or bored, and it doesn't get interrupted by phone calls. It doesn't forget to check absolutely everything for absolutely every user that I've told it to look at. By doing that, it doesn't make my data perfect, but it makes it a whole lot more consistent and a lot closer to being data than the garbage it was when it came in. This slide has links to the tools that I use, Visual Studio, Protege Solutions for Skylab, and links to the Sky developer community. Also some links to some other APIs and other tools that I use for other programs, not this one. There's a link at the top of the chat for a link to get this slide set, and from there you can get the links to these tools that I use. I want to take just a minute to talk about some other programs that I work on. Some of them are used to automate routine tasks. We've been sending the "you forgot to take attendance again" emails for a long time. Blackbaud added that feature recently. We still use the program that I wrote because it sends it in the format we want, to the people we want, and when we want. It doesn't send it just once. We send multiple reminders for people who can't seem to get their attendance taken. One of the other programs I use that saves me a lot of time is a program will write lists of students with a lot of information into a shared Google Sheet. So I've got a sheet out there shared to all employees. One page is all students, one page is upper school, one page is middle school students, one page is day students, one is residential students, and it has lots of information, phone numbers, email addresses, birthdays, advisor, all of that stuff that I always get asked for. Employees can just go get it themselves, and they don't have to bother me with it. We also maintain a bunch of Google groups, and I've got a set of programs that will generate the membership lists for those groups and run the updates once a day. I don't think about the Google groups. The registrar changes an email address, and sometime around 7 o'clock in the evening, all of the relevant Google groups are updated. Then I have one other program that we use this time of year. It writes course request information and summaries into Google Sheets that the folks who do our scheduling use to keep track of where they are and did they really give 5 courses to every student, or is someone still sitting at 4, and they know to go back and look at that student again. The other general kind of program that I write are ones that fill in the gap between the SIS and how we operate. So we have rules about attendance, just like every school does. But we keep track of high absence rates for various reasons. Missing study hall is a disciplinary issue eventually, but not necessarily an academic penalty with it. But missing multiple occurrences of an academic class for reasons that aren't acceptable is a different matter. So we've got a program that looks at just the classes we want and just the reasons we want. We have assigned seating at lunch 4 days a week. So I've got a program that will generate the random table assignments that gets run every 2 or 3 weeks just to shake things up. And the first programs that I wrote were to generate grid schedules, just like EE used to do. We have a 7-day rotating schedule. All the classes rotate throughout the day except for the ones that don't. And so having the programs to generate those grid schedules make life easier for our students, and actually was a key factor in getting faculty buy-in. They would not have liked this very much if they didn't get to keep their grid schedules. So that's everything that I wanted to talk about. We've got a little bit of time for questions. One from Lauren, is education management my primary system of communicating out to families? We do use push pages, but we also use Google Groups. Our marketing and communications office is in the process right now of adopting another tool to replace push pages. And our advancement office, of course, uses messaging tools in RE to communicate with alumni and current families and trustees and others that they care about. We also have a third-party emergency communications service, which, by the way, has a nice, clean integration to Blackbaud. They just come in and pull our data once a day and everything works very well. Yes, it is. Ruvna is the service that we use. They pull in a lot of stuff, and they've done some customizations for us to handle some oddball situations to actually keep a couple of students off of our lists that we don't want to get notifications because they're spending the year in Japan, for example. And Scott, I don't see other questions. Are there any others pending?
Brian, one just came in the chat from Kathleen there, but I don't see any. We're caught up on questions.
Okay, yeah, Ruvna is the third-party emergency communication service that we use. We use announcements, and we also use accountability product from Ruvna, which is used to take quick attendance during a school lockdown or other crisis. We like that tool a lot. If you're not familiar with it, ruvna.com, take a look at it. And I think you'll like it too. The absence system is very specific to us, not nearly enough time to talk about it here, but I'd be happy to talk with you offline about it, Kathleen. And we can arrange that by you sending me an email. My address is up on the screen now. And thanks very much for your attention today and for joining me. This is a tool that I use a lot for many, many, many different things. Lots of interesting work that we can do, and it's absolutely worth taking the time to figure out how to do it. And I think that's it. Scott, I'll send it back over to you to wrap up.
Thank you, Brian. I'll post the survey. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Please fill out the survey. And don't forget about that innovation grant I showed at the beginning. Thank you.